Welcome to a Lunch and Learn hosted by Ashrei Foundation and Women's Voices. We are so glad that you are here with us. This is our first event in Women's Voices new space. We moved to Webster Hills United Methodist Church at the beginning of the year, and they have lots of lovely spaces, and we've been trying them out. So this is our first time in this space, and so far so good. We're delighted to have you here, and I'm going to pass it on to the Director of Ashrei Foundation, and she will introduce our guest.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Sarah Ruiz. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Executive Director of the Ashrei Foundation. We are a relatively new nonprofit founded by Rabbi Susan Talvey, working to interrupt generational cycles of poverty. We run a photo ID project in North City and are really involved in that issue, which is exactly, in fact, how I got to meet today's speaker, Miss Mead. Mevi is currently serving as the Director of Strategic Partnerships at Missouri Jobs with Justice and is the facilitator of the Will of the People Coalition. Is that the right way to say that? Great. And I've had an opportunity to throw down with Mevi a couple of times this year so far, which is delightful. So I'm really excited that she's here to talk about initiative petitions. Mevi has over 25 years leading progressive power building in Missouri and also nationally. She came from Washington, D.C., and served as the Executive Director of Missouri NARAL, which is now Abortion Action Missouri, and went on to build the organizing, power building, and policy programs for Planned Parenthood Advocates in Missouri, which is now part of Planned Parenthood of the St. Louis region and Southwest and all of those things. She also has experience co-creating a national organizing model for Planned Parenthood called the Path to Power. And in her current position, she's really involved with the Missourians for Healthy Families and Fair Wages campaign and staffs the Will of the People Coalition, which is, as you might know, the coalition that is really focusing on defending Missouri's 100+ year tradition of direct democracy through the initiative petition process. So she has a much more rad and elaborate history. If you want to learn more about her, I would encourage you to talk to her afterwards, but I will get out of the way and turn it over to you. Welcome.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Women's Voices Raised for Social Justice, for having me. Sarah said my name is Mevi. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm currently serving as the Director of Strategic Partnerships for Missouri Jobs with Justice, which is an entity that does what is in its title, believes that all of us should be able to work in a just environment, and whether that's through supporting organized labor workers, unions, whether it's supporting youth coming up into the justice world, faith leaders, and we're super active in all things justice oriented, as are you. It's very personally satisfying to be here today. I'm pretty sure it was July of 2021, Harriet Woods, rest in peace, the first women statewide office holder in Missouri and a mentor to many, including me, called me up and said, there are these super dynamic women. They have super big ideas about what they want to do. I can't remember what they're called. I think there's Women and Voices, and they're all about social justice and change. And I know you know about social justice and change. I have been very active in the reproductive rights movement at that stage, as Sarah mentioned. Anyway, and she wanted me to sit down and meet and talk about how to lobby, how to do this work. I was 8 months pregnant, so it's a very memorable moment. My kid is 22, I think that's right. So Barb Finch and several others, and I sat down, and they were all super interested in telling me all the things I needed to know as an 8 months pregnant person with my first birth, and that I got way more out of this meeting, let me tell you, than they got, because the minute I started with, who's in the room, what do you know? And the depth of experience and the sophistication of this founding group was just phenomenal. And so I think we ended up breaking into small groups and basically everybody teaching other people what to do. And after I did the meeting, I dutifully called Harriet back and said, I was glad to do it, but let me just tell you, these folks, they have it down. You don't need to send in any more help to them. They've got it. And I was right. And so here you are today. It's amazing, amazing. So I'm here today to talk about the initiative petition process, give you some history, and talk about what's going on with it and what might continue to happen with it. So before I get started, you've heard a lot about me in this introduction. Thank you, it's very generous. But I wonder if we could quickly just go around the room and you can say, who you are and maybe why this particular Lunch and Learn compelled you. It could be like, I just got this on my calendar, I do it every time, or I'm just curious what, again, with my experience with women's voices, there's often way more experience in the room than I have. So I always want to try and draw that out and cater what I share with that. So your friendly face nodding. Do you want to start?
Sure. I'm not one of the people that had the depth of knowledge, but I belong to a group called Braver Angels, and each month we look into something having to do with government, and we're half Republican, half Democrat, and our next topic is the initiative process. We have a lot of reading to find. I haven't read it yet, but it sounds very interesting to me, so I'm here to learn more.
Great. I don't know why the computer is doing that. Okay. I was getting my notebook out, which is why I'm the disappearing person on the computer. Sorry about that. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. That's exciting.
I think you have a mouse in your bag. Does it switch? Like a computer mouse?
Sorry.
Sorry.
I do.
You might want to back your slides up and click forward again. There you go.
This is the mouse that's in the bag.
Sorry.
Okay. And then I'll go backwards. I'm so sorry. The next person, please.
I'm Melissa Miller. I just came across my Facebook feed and I'm someone involved with the organization posting. And
Excellent.
We are partnering with Missouri on things like an initiative, which you know and that's doing well right now.
Very exciting. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Jenna Alexander. I've been sort of following women's voices online for a little while. I've also been gathering signatures, so I'm here to learn more.
Excellent.
I'm Julie Gavey. I have been involved in the petition process with the Women Voters, and before that I was I did it with the petition process with Missouri organizing for their.
Yeah. And you show up. Yeah.
Came podcast, and I've been politically active on things for years, but most recently on the abortion action petitions. And as I was walking into the meeting, I got a call from Lisa, who's the coordinator, and she said that on election day they collected 15,000, which is a record.
Oh, wow.
Our goal was they collected 15, so now we just need more in St. Charles, Springfield, a little bit in the rural area. So good.
Yeah. Excellent update.
Hey, I'm Jean Lunsford. I live in Kirkwood. I'm active in Democrat Club, Women's Voices, LeadMO and LeadMO Action. My first exposure to initiative petition was working on the smoke-free law, both I heard from the state.
Awesome.
Marcy Brodsky, I'm still working on the initiative petition for the and I'm also the Ashrei.
I'm Carol Loxley. A long time ago, did a lot of work for OS and OS in the past. I've
reshape and the Ashrei, and like everybody else, I'm collecting to be.
Hi, everybody. I'm Karen Francis, and I am the Advocacy Director here for Women's Voices. I'm also the State President of American Association of University Women. And I was up there Tuesday morning and I got 22 signatures. I was so excited, even in the cold and the rain and everything else. So thank you for all you're doing. And Betty and I go, we go way back. We go way back.
I'm Nancy Thompson. I'm the co-president of Legal Voters of Metro St. Louis, and we have a long history actually of supporting the concept of initiative petition. And the last several years, we've become very interested in that and called it our #1 program priority for this year. And of course, we're also supporting some petitions that are out there, but we're focused on the process as well.
I'm Kate Clark. I'm also involved with League of Women Voters and very active in the whole abortion action position as everybody else is here. And I am involved with the legislative committee and Kansas City with the League of Women Voters. And on the committee looks for reproductive rights, focusing on the petition. And then also very much on the initiative petition committee because I feel like that's the biggest threat to getting this passed, even if we get the whole thing on the ballot.
Okay, so I think we've hit everyone in the room. So I brought my signs and I put them on the front of the podium in case I got a sudden case of laryngitis and I couldn't say anything. If you take nothing else away, this is what we know through lots of research history in Missouri, that Missourians want to protect one person, one vote. We want to protect majority rule, and that we want to note and want other Missourians to know that we're saying no to politician tricks. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about each of those pieces, but if you remember nothing else from this presentation, I've been taught well by many who have come before me that don't count on what I say, just you can see the messaging there for yourself. And so I'm going to actually go in a different order than I had originally planned. So I thought I'd start with the history, and then that I think cues up why maybe the attacks are happening the way they're happening now. Although from what everyone just said in this room, spoiler alert, you already know what's going on here, but I wanted to give a little bit of perspective and history. So it's over 100 years that Missourians have cherished, supported, utilized this element of our one person, one vote sharing of our voices, which is a huge part of the mission of this organization. And we have used it and used this direct democracy responsibly. And it's not an easy process. One of the things that got pointed out in the floor debate just this past week in the Missouri House is that a talking point for those who are opposing majority rule and trying to upend it in this trickster type of way that we'll get more into, they're saying, well, the Constitution is super long and it's too easy to change. So it was pointed out to folks that of the 134 amendments to the Constitution, the Missouri Constitution, that so-called supporters of these efforts that would undo it point to as a reason they need to change the process, actually only 19 came from the process they're trying to mess up. The vast majority of those changes came from the legislature itself, referring items to the ballot. So what we have done through the citizen initiative petition process, meaning this process that you all are very familiar with, you have to get gobs of signatures from Missouri voters, and then all those signatures have to get checked and rechecked and triple checked, and they need to be dispersed throughout a broad array of Missouri districts, and then it gets approved, and then it goes on the ballot, and then you have to get a majority of people to vote for it. That's a big, big process, and it has been used in the 1930s. I mean, again, with 1907 it started. I'm not naming every single one that happened, but some that are notable. So we were using the process to allow public employee benefits. And one of the things, I'm married to an environmental activist, and that is a big part of our family history. And we benefit so much from this. I think it was 1937 when Joe Leopold put together the effort to create what is now the Department of Conservation in Missouri to protect Missouri's hunting, fishing, natural, beautiful streams. All of the nature was appreciated by those environmental activists, and realized that they needed an institution in government that was shielded from political back and forth. So they established this, it was called the Conservation Commission at the time, and they set up a funding stream that was through taxation, so it wouldn't be subject to legislative trickery, and that would be a dedicated resource. And it's a national model. Many other states have imitated it. And, frankly, they sponsor things. I talked about being pregnant with my kid. I'm now the parent of 2 kids in their 20s, but we spend a lot of time at Missouri Department of Conservation events. They host, you go out to this pond in a nature preserve at night and start hearing and seeing all the frogs and lizards and stuff, so they could learn about nature in a really hands-on, amazing way that this department puts on. So it also manages fish, game, and other forest resources. I'm not a huge fan of this amendment, but in 1980, the process was used to adopt the Hancock Amendment, which has a lot of tax implication that can be hard to do the kind of social justice we work, or can put limits on how the state funds them. But it was a, honest to goodness initiative petition, went through the whole process. This is for me to say that this process is not only for things MEVI likes, or Jobs with Justice likes, or Women's Voices like. This process is open to all of our citizens. It's direct democracy, and sometimes it's been used to, for lack of a better term, advance conservative measures, and sometimes it's been used to advance what I would call more progressive measures, or those who are centering the social justice that we all care about. Other things that I didn't love, I'm sort of agnostic on riverboat gambling, but that's how we got riverboat gambling approved. The legislature repealed some campaign finance limitations that was used in the statutory citizen process, and citizens responded in multiple elections, this time trying to enshrine some of the campaign finance stuff in the Constitution. So that is how the process has been used. I'm going to stop there in case people have questions about the history, or why we even have the process, or how it's been used.
I'm wondering the context. How common is this in other states?
It's an excellent question. I'm going to not name the number. It's over a dozen of other states that have the process. And these attacks on the process have been executed and are in the works in some of these other states. So for example, Ohio has a very similar process, and we are potentially in a complete copycat situation of Ohio's last election. So they had this long history process of using the petition. The abortion rights action folks in Ohio wanted to reinstate access to abortion in Ohio using the process. And as they were doing that, the legislature then put on an earlier election than they were qualified an attempt to change the rules and break majority rule in Ohio. And that effort was completely unsuccessful. The abortion rights and democracy advocates essentially beat all expectations, overwhelmingly defeated the effort in an August ballot to mess up the process and majority rule. And then the abortion rights folks and the voters of Ohio went on to protect and advance abortion access in November. So there's a playbook here that's going on from these other states and from these strong, politically motivated entities that don't like this direct democracy, particularly how it's being used of late to advance social justice. Other questions? Yeah.
I'm not sure if this is on target with what you're talking about, but if we're successful in, reversing the total abortion ban on the Constitution, I mean, we've had a lot of legislation in Missouri where we passed legislation, but then the legislators didn't abide by it. Is this something that, if it's in the Constitution, they can't mess with it, or do they still have the ability to, it's like, I'm trying to think of some, the Uppy Mill situation. I mean, I'm trying to think of the things that Medicaid, where it was passed, but those weren't constitutional things, right? Those were,
No, there's so many factors here, and it gets kind of complicated kind of fast. Thus, Mevi has her talking points right here. These are the things we need to remember. But to your point, exactly. So we can use this citizen initiative process to either change state law or change the Constitution. It's a harder process to change the Constitution, I think, for obvious reasons. And then if you change either one of them, if you change a law, well, you can use this process to change either one of those, the law or the Constitution. But the legislature has full purview over law. So they can turn around in the next legislative session after the election where you maybe succeed in changing the law. And they've done this, as you mentioned, with a couple, there was gun rights stuff in the 90s. They did it with the puppy mills. They did it on the campaign finance, where if you use the process and you choose to change a law, they can undo it relatively easily. They just have a majority, and they've got super majorities against a lot of the things that I care about and Jobs with Justice cares about. If you change the Constitution, if they want to undo it, they have to go back to a vote of the people. And so what I think is going on, and what I hear the folks leading the abortion rights action, and what from my experience working on the issue, is that we've got a situation where there's a movement that claims they have the majority of Missourians who want to ban abortion, want to put doctors in jail, want to create terrible consequences for Missouri families. They say, and have been saying for decades, that the majority of Missourians agree with the position. I happen to know from lots of polling and experience that's not the case. And now that the case is being put to a direct test of the people, in the context of the people now seeing, feeling, hearing the devastating consequences of the abortion ban, they're afraid for that fair fight, essentially, where they have to make their case to the voters. So instead of fighting the abortion initiative by the rules, they're trying to change the rules and make it harder for the abortion advocates to protect that right by changing the Constitution. I mean, they could, if, let's just scenario out this effort to attack the process and make it super difficult and end majority rule. It could fail between now and the end or the middle of May in the legislature. They could fail to advance it. I'm working on that. If they do pass it, then we can defeat it, and will, hopefully, all of you engaged, we would defeat it on whatever ballot it gets put on, and then abortion could go on. Abortion could get protected via the Constitution in, say, the November vote. That process that we're talking about is open to those who oppose abortion. They could go get their signatures. They could go try and put another change on the Constitution. It might be a little bit legally complicated, but that's what lawyers are for. They could figure it out and try and get the majority of people to undo what they had just done. They could do it. That's what this process is about. But that's not what they're doing. They're not playing by the rules. They're trying to rig the rules. Other questions about history or process? Okay, let me look at my time. Okay, awesome. We're great. You're great. Okay, back this way. Yeah, okay. So given all of that history, here's where we are in 2024. And all the things I'm going to talk to you about and what I know on this, I'm standing on the shoulders of at least 5 years of Jobs with Justice has led this work. The Missouri Voter Protection Coalition, the Women's Voices have been involved. Any number of you, the abortion rights folks, have been involved in defending this process against attacks that have been going on for almost half a decade. So you should know that means, and you mentioned, so what are the other states? We've learned from other states, we learned from our research on Missouri voters, and we learned from each legislative session. the people who want to end majority rule have also learned a thing or two over those times. And so the attacks I'm about to talk about have evolved. And I just do want to have people know that there is a general sense in that Republican controlled legislature, and then that they hold all of the statewide offices, that they're interested in, from their behavior shows that they're interested in consolidating power. And that is what is driving, in my opinion, Missouri Jobs with Justice, because if you have to deal with all of the voters, that's a lot more complicated than if you have to deal with some very wired, wealthy donors to do what the agenda is. So where that universe of wealthy, wired donors didn't want us to expand Medicaid, even though the federal money was sitting in the bank to pay for 300,000 Missouri working people to get health care, when we finally were able to take that into the direct democracy and win. And then it was crafted very carefully to withstand some legislative trickery to try not to implement Medicaid expansion. Right now, I think I just looked, the expansion population is something like, in last month's Medicaid rules, 313,000 Missourians are now getting health care through that expansion. And they wouldn't have had that without this process. Well, that's made some people mad. People who don't believe that Missourians deserve access to health care in that way. So that's the attacks. Of course, the abortion issue is also motivating attacks, but it's not just the abortion issue, I would argue. So this is what would happen if, and we'll talk about the specific measures, but this is politicians, very specifically politicians who should be working for all of us, are trying to end the thing that gives all of us power. That's the bottom line, and majority rule. And math has been done by some journalists about the various proposals, but basically the output of what they're trying to do would mean that for something to pass, it would need not just a majority or a majority, it's a hard fought one majority. It would need possibly up to 70% approval. And many of the things that I've talked about that are making a huge difference in people's lives, and even some conservative ones that I don't like, didn't meet that threshold. That's a hard threshold. But what that really means is that this super tiny, 1 in 4 Missourians are vetoing the will of the vast majority. That's wrong. Missourians don't like that. You feel free to talk about that. I mentioned, we talked about this. It's a long-standing, very popular effort to have democracy. And then I do want to spend a little bit on this third point about politicians are trying to trick you. So we have learned, and just by watching the evolution of the attacks, they basically started attacking this process by just trying to put legislation to flat out change. It's going to take 65 or there was 63 or 57. Their bills that had all those thresholds. So basically people get majority is 50% plus one, and they could clearly see these bills, they're changing that. That's not like in Ohio. I love that they use this one image. They're oh shoot, I don't follow football, but Ohio's a big football thing. So big Ohio State rivalry between Ohio and Michigan. So one of the ways they chose in Ohio to explain what was going on is they had a scoreboard that had Ohio State or whatever that is, with 25 points in this game of football. And then they had a picture of Michigan with 22 points, and then the headline was Michigan wins. Like that's what they're doing, is they're totally changing the rules of the game. The bills in previous sessions put that directly into it. Well, they started getting a lot of pushback of people like majority rule. So the legislations that they are pushing this year actually use the term majority of majority of majority. Like you can tell they get that majority is popular, and they're using the term majority, majority, majority to actually make it so that it's a minority rule, but they're doing it in this deceptive, trickster way. And then they're also trying to, have people heard of this term ballot candy? So it's this idea that as part of this initiative process, and this is the legislature is very well known for this, you include things in the measure that aren't particularly substantive. They're not really what it's about, but they're things voters are like, wait, what? Citizens are voting? No, or non-citizens are voting. I'm, easily triggered on some of that xenophobic stuff. I'm going to vote for this without thinking about all the other implications. Another one around this that is, again, also stoking racism and xenophobia, saying that there's no foreign money allowed in elections. Both those things are already not allowed, meaning only citizens can vote in Missouri, and foreign entities are not allowed to mess with or fund Missouri electoral politics or initiative petitions. So that's what I'm talking about when I'm saying that people are trying to trick. They use the term majority to actually undo majority rule, and then they put these things that are already prohibited in Missouri law or in the Missouri Constitution. They're re-upping those to make people want to vote for something that ultimately they don't want to do. That's the definition of political trickery. Any questions about the nature of these attacks? Okay, let's see where we go next. We did the history. Okay, so I didn't want to put a ton out here. I know I've worked with this audience of the Women's Voices before. You get your bill numbers, you follow the legislature, you track it all. So I didn't want to get a ton of text up here, but if you are paying attention, and I'm going to give you some ideas about how to do this super easily, you don't have to take notes, but if you want, here they are. The most furthest along piece of legislation in the 2024 Missouri General Assembly, which ends on May 17th. So that's the window we're working with. We've got between now and May 17th for them to either get this past both chambers or not. I vote for not, but anyway, they've got one jumped all the, so it's the Senate version, Senate joint resolution. The joint resolution just means it's a resolution, not a law. So it'll go to the people to vote on it. And the only role the governor gets to play in that is he can pick what election it gets put on. And we can talk more about that. So that's the furthest bill along. It's by Senator Coleman. It has been through the Senate with a very complicated debate. Now it got over to the House. A House committee just loaded it up with junk, more ballot candy, made it a different kind of animal than what came over from the Senate. It has another committee vote in the House, and then we'll see a House floor debate on it. And it will be very interesting to see if they have anything changed from the Senate. It has to go back to the Senate, and the clock is ticking down to May 17th. So that's the furthest along. That if you're going to watch one bill, that's one I would watch. But just in case, and this has happened in the Missouri legislature before, they kind of trip up over what the thing they think they should be doing or want to do. Somebody gets mad, and the House and the Senate have tension. So there's also a House vehicle for this. It's HJR 86. The representative is Black, who is sponsoring it. It has moved over to the Senate, but it's not as far along as the Senate bill that's moved in the House. It includes all the things I've been talking about and then some. It's an even worse version. They're all bad. And that, again, would have to go through the whole Senate process. If the Senate changes it, it would have to go back to the House. You can see why I didn't put all this down on the slide. And so, but that is another one to be watching. And if that makes it all the way through the process, again, then it would be up to us to vote on it. And I would urge you to vote against it if it ends up on a ballot. And now this House Bill 1749 it changes the law around how you gather signatures. It would make it much harder for what all of you have talked about doing. The organizations who are trying to help get you out there at the polls or wherever you're going, grocery stores, to do that signature collection. It changes some, they call it like exactly how the form is already complicated enough, right? Like, and there are lots and lots of places, I'm sure if you've been trained, where you can go awry. So it makes that a little bit harder. It makes it harder to find people to gather signatures. They have to be a Missouri resident for a certain amount of time. It changes how people can and can't get paid to do that work, also making it harder. So it's a law change, it's not a constitutional change. Oh, and the kicker in that one also, it gives the Secretary of State, currently John Ashcroft, open seat because he's running for governor, but he's shown that he invents shenanigans on how to make it harder to qualify. And as many of you know, he's lost many lawsuits over how he has bungled the process and made it difficult for people doing this process and following the rules. So that's another way he's been trying to change rules. Well, now he's just like bald face, give me more power. And that's what this bill, I should call it, give Ashcroft more power bill, House Bill 1749, because he would then get to the power. It's not been all the way through the process. I'm sure it would be litigated, but it looks like it's trying to give the Secretary of State the chance that when they see these petitions, they can be like, nope, not constitutional. That's his decision. Right now, that goes to the courts, and the courts have definitely had a more citizen-oriented and rule-abiding approach to how they're interpreting the law than the Secretary of State has had. So those are the three big bills, and they're actually all accumulation. Like they're like the bill string for that. HJR has 3 other numbers on it, but again, if you're watching numbers, if you're looking on the Missouri legislative website, these are the ones to follow. Questions about those bills? Yes.
Unless you're planning to treat it later in the talk, could you tell the difference between the way the initiative process is now and the way it would be if the Coleman resolution?
Sure. Yeah. No. That's there are slight differences. So I'm going to give you a general version, and they keep changing. So I don't want to like lock us into one interpretation, because I'm quite certain on the House floor, this SJR will change. And I don't know if the Senate will even mess with the HJR at all. But anyway, what that one, I'll talk about SJR 74 would do in the main part of it, that is about ending majority rule. It says if you have a petition that people have qualified, and I think her version right now, by the way, from the House actually also includes if the legislature refers it, but her original one didn't. This is why it's so complicated. Anyway, so we vote on it, and a majority of people vote to say pass Medicaid expansion. This would change it so that it was the majority, and here's where we get to using lots of majority, would also have to get a majority of people in a majority of the congressional district. So it's a majority to give a minority veto power over what the majority does. That's ending majority rule. And now that one also has ballot candy including like a phony thing that would not have any effect, but is designed to lure voters to say, oh, we'll get more power over it. There's a review process that actually already exists in Missouri law, but this one, it adds that now. Again, I would anticipate as part of House floor debate, there will be amendments. You just have to keep checking. And I'm going to give you ways to do that as we go. Other questions?
So this HB 1749, that one would not go to the voters?
Nope. The governor would get to sign it or veto it if it passes. It's out of the House, it's in the Senate hands. Things move way slower in the Senate. And just another piece of context of what's going on in the Missouri legislature right now is they're constitutionally mandated to do one thing, pass a budget. So they're in the middle of doing that right now. The House has moved it over to the Senate. Now the Senate will take it up. And the other thing that they're not constitutionally obligated to, but they really, really got to do, because it's I can't keep track of all the zeros. It's a $4 billion portion of our 50 something plus billion state budget. So quite a bit. I can't do fractions in my head, but anyway, it's a big chunk of money. It's called the federal reimbursement allowance, but it's a payment mechanism that we use to fund Medicaid, essentially, through what's called a provider tax, hospitals, pharmacies, and it's a complicated program, and it needs to get approved. And if they don't, then our budget is completely trashed or has a ginormous $4 billion hole in it. So there are a couple things that are weighing on the Missouri Senate and House that could impact, and is why like things don't always just sail through, because there's factions and interests and really important things. But they are also constitutionally mandated to be done with the budget that first week in May, whatever that Friday is, and then done with this year's session by the 17th of May. And just for fun, the governor can also call special elections or special sessions. So sometimes when we think we're done and everyone wants to go on vacation, we can't. Yes.
Can I ask one more question? Sorry,
Of
I think
course.
you already said it, but,
Yeah.
Coleman's bill, if that resolution passes, who or how do they make the determination which ballot gets put on?
So what happens is a piece of a resolution gets passed by the legislature, then it has to go to the Secretary of State for some administrative stuff. He turns it into an amendment, and then the governor gets to pick, or it typically will go on the November following. That's like if no one does anything, that's what it gets put on, but the governor can decide. So for example, with Medicaid, we all assumed it would be on November, and then all of a sudden, the Secretary of State rushed the approval process and the governor put it on August because they thought it would be easier to defeat. They were wrong, but it did. That is the governor's purview. And I'll just say that the August and November are the most obvious elections, but the governor has the power to pick any special election date he wants, with some constraints about how much lead time is required.
And even if, I've heard this question come up, which is why I'm filling in on it, even if we play all the worst case scenarios and that goes through and it's a special election, say September or the August, whatever, and it passes, it doesn't impact, it is not likely to impact, like the implementation date for those changes would presumably be in the future, right? So it wouldn't necessarily impact current ballot initiative efforts.
It absolutely could. Absolutely. The law right now for those, when we pass it, whatever election it's on, is 30 days later. It's done. It's in the Constitution and it's governing us. For some reason, Coleman's bill changes it to 31 days. I don't know. Anyway, yes. So this is the scenario most people are super wigged about. The governor, they pass it, which is, let's make sure that doesn't happen. But if it does, then the governor gets to pick which election to put it on. Governor puts it on August, changes the rules, and time for a thing that happens in November to no longer be valid. That would be very bad, terrible, no good thing to happen for Missourians. And so that's why we'd have to beat the heck out of it. Okay, you and then you.
Can he just not put it on?
No, he doesn't have the power there. The way
Say
it's.
I'm gonna put it on for 2030, or like, what is the?
Oh.
We have a back in time, like most people think he'll try to.
I don't know about how far into the future his powers go. We've all been so nervous about the earlier scenarios, and he would face a lot of political opposition to set it way in the future, but I'm going to find out the answer to that.
I thought that, they think he's gonna put it on August because he doesn't want to know the Democratic votes on November.
Oh my gosh. I mean, talk about sports betting, which also, by the way, they're trying to approve. If I could figure out odds in betting, I'm in so many conversations about what are they thinking? Well, what if that, and they're all running for the offices against each other. So what is this guy? Most of them are guys, not all, but anyway, what does this person want for their election and this and that? And there are a lot of Republican primaries in August. So there is a scenario, and it's not politically dumb to think that, oh, that's going to be a high Republican turnout. If we think Republicans are more inclined to vote this way or that way, we want to serve up this thing on this election. I will say that you haven't heard me talk about this as a Democrat or Republican issue because it's not. And so our research shows that regardless of how you identify either partisan or conservative or whatever, a majority of Missourians feel very strongly about majority rule. They feel very strongly about one person, one vote, and they do not like, it just makes it all worse when they believe they're being tricked. So yes, everything has a partisan layer on it, but this issue is not partisan. It's about the issues that we use it for. Karen.
So clarification, right now, I'm aware of these 3 initiative petitions that are out there, one on gaming, one on tourism, justice, raising minimum wage, and then the abortion. We have to get signatures in 6 out of 8 congressional districts currently. If one of these goes through, we have to get a majority in all 8, or what's the benchmark if it gets changed? I've heard it goes with all 8 congressional districts. Right now it's 6 out of 8.
So I believe the House bill may have some in it. I'm gonna have to get back to you, Karen, for sure. And then there's been different proposals about the signature gathering, but I would say the biggest thing we're worried about, and is consistently in both the SJR and HJR, is it changes the vote, not the signature gathering part. It changes the vote. There have been, and there probably are, a number of bills that also impact the gathering, but ultimately it seems like the people who want to oppose majority rule has settled that the best way to do that is to change what it takes to pass something. And yes, some other people want to make it harder to qualify something, but I think if you're like, your real end game is to end majority rule, you end majority rule at the vote, not at the signature gathering. And let me just say that the signature gathering threshold is, you don't have to get every district, which though many groups do, but you do have to get a certain amount in 5 of the 8, and then it's a higher threshold for to change the Constitution than to change the law. There was another hand over here.
I was just thinking maybe they'll end up doing both. Is that what you're saying? If they'll change how we gather signatures and they'll change the requirement of the majority.
It's all possible. I mean, they have the votes to do all of this. But then there are some very significant, particularly, I mentioned that there's some donors with lots of money and influence. I mean, the people behind the sports betting are pretty powerful, and they're not necessarily interested in seeing the system messed up. They're using it right now. So it's not a foregone conclusion, I would say, in any of these. I'm telling you what is moving and what is furthest along, and also that it can all be changed. So this is a good time to be talking about it, but it's also it's a little bit still up in the air. That's democracy, messy.
So in HB 1749 passed, and the legislative, after all these signatures are gathered and turned in by May 4th, can they retroactively go back?
That's a great question. My understanding is that and courts have ruled on this, that people collecting the things under the law that at the time of which they're collecting will stand. And so I think also House Bill 1749, a bill, if it makes it through the process, the governor signs it, it doesn't go into effect until August. So it wouldn't change the rules until August. And at that point, most of this work for this cycle, would be done. Good question. Excellent. Love your questions. Should I say something more? Let's see. Oh, so for people who want to get in the weeds, the Missouri Voter Protection Coalition, led by Denise Lieberman, and we partner together, and they maintain an initiative petition specific bill tracker. The link is super long. I could not put it on. I tried, but it would not be good. anyway, so the thing to do is to email me, Mebby, at mojwj.org, and I will send you that link. Sure, of course. Which part? Mebby, me, M-E-V as in Victor, I-E, Mebby, at mo, M-O-J-W-J.org.
And I think we could probably send out this one.
Yeah, but she's trying to get it in her
We
notes.
could probably send out a follow-up email with that link too, right?
Of course, yeah, you can have the whole thing. Okay, so what can you do? You all are already doing a ton. I don't know why. Anyway, but the Will of the People is a coalition of lots of other organizations. So we didn't want to create a whole nother organization with all that infrastructure when there's so many other great folks doing this work, including Women's Voices. So these are the top 3 that I know if you signed up to get in their action alerts, you're going to find out about the initiative petition. You might find out about a few other things, but you probably already know about them. Anyway, so again, as Sarah mentioned, we can circulate this, but MissouriJobsWithJustice.org, you just click on it, sign up to take action. You'll be in their system. ProgressMo.com is a place that collects and helps provide excellent media resources, but it's where they have a clips thing. You can find out all this stuff. And then of course, Denise's group, Mo Voter Protection Coalition. I tried to actually get to the IP tracker through her website, and I couldn't. Maybe you could, but I have the link, so I can give that to you for sure. And so again, I put my contact info up here. And I have, we're at 1 minute. So I would be remiss if I didn't talk about my other hat that I wear, where many of you already know about this. Women's Voices, Race for Social Justice is an endorser, as are a bunch of other groups that you're involved with, have endorsed this effort that's changing the law, not the Constitution. So, and what we're going to do with that, and we actually have in 2014 and 2018, we raised the minimum wage through this process of having people vote to change the law. So we're doing that again. So it would raise the minimum wage to $15 per hour by 2026. It's a stepped up piece. And then it would also, and I think super excitingly, we've not tried this before through this process, but it would guarantee all Missouri workers the ability to earn paid sick leave. I did not know that wasn't already going on before I started researching this. Awful. People often are hat-faced with losing their job to care for a sick kid because they have no sick leave. So this would, and it's where 15 other states have done it, and they're doing great. So it's a very good thing. And we're pretty much collected all of the signatures that we need to qualify. They will get turned in early May, and then we'll be subject to the same thing. Like, what does the governor do? Maybe the Secretary of State tries to mess with us. We're preparing for all the eventualities, but I think I don't know if I want to guarantee it. Maybe I'll just go ahead and guarantee you're going to get a chance to vote on raising the minimum wage and guaranteeing Missouri workers the ability to earn paid sick leave in 2024. And we hope that you will support that on whatever ballot it gets on. And I have a whole nother presentation about that I'm not going to, I saw some scared looking eyes. We're not doing that today, but just know that if that's something you're interested in, there's only 3 of us on this entire campaign, so we can't necessarily get to everyone, but there is more information about that, and we have a website. Okay, I've hit time. I know some people have to go, have already gone. That is perfectly fine, but I also have some time to stick around. And I know you're doing all this tech stuff, so I need to free you up from that too. This has been great. I really, really appreciate your questions, your support, your deep work on direct democracy in Missouri, and for your time today.